Matthew 17. It's 14 through 21. And when they were come to the multitude, who's the they? What had they come from? And who was waiting on Jesus? How did they know where he was? Who told them where he was? How did they go and find him? Was there only one road, trail, up and down that mountain? What were the circumstances that would allow? Was the mountain small enough that they could circumference it to where they had to catch him when he came down? Where was it he was coming from? The Mount of Transfiguration. What had occurred on the Mount of Transfiguration?
You're asking what had occurred? He brought Peter, James, and John with him up to the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
He had a conversation with Moses and Elijah.
Mm-hmm.
And to prepare for his death, burial, and resurrection, and for the coming of the kingdom.
Okay. What else?
Went home. There you go. There you go. He left.
Good answer, Mike. But I don't think it's correct.
No, he didn't go home. But what had occurred there?
No, he told the disciples that they was unbelieving.
Sir?
He told the disciples that they were unbelieving. That's why they couldn't perform the miracles that he was performing.
On the Mount of Transfiguration? What had occurred on the Mount of Transfiguration?
Moses was informed that Christ would be coming down to get his people.
That's true. What had occurred on the Mount of Transfiguration? Those events took place, but what occurred on the Mount of Transfiguration?
Bright light, as bright as the noonday sun, and then they didn't see Jesus anymore, but then they saw three. And it was Moses and Elijah and Jesus there. And Peter asked if he should make tabernacles for the three of them. He said no.
What happened on the mountain?
Yes, sir.
Christ was transfigured.
Well, God came out and spoke. God came out and spoke.
And what?
In a class.
He told them that Jesus was his beloved son.
And what is all this about?
So the disciples.
Delivering up to the church. Delivering up to no.
Well, let's go to Luke 9. We'll read over there. It's only 6 verses.
Okay.
You're in trouble saying you got her notes out. You're in trouble.
And it came, verse 37, came to pass that on the next day, when they were come down from the hill, much people met him. Now, Luke says it's a hill, but that's okay.
It's all relevant where you live.
All right? But what had occurred on the hill? That's all I want to find out. What occurred on the hill? Sir?
God spoke to the disciples, telling them that was his beloved son. And then, Jesus, Moses, and Elijah was there. And after God spoke, all of them was gone except Jesus.
Isn't that the time when Jesus was without food and water and
Well, that's the 40 days and 40 nights.
40 days?
Are you asking if he prepared the kingdom by saying Elijah in the third heaven be prepared, Moses in
All of those things occurred, but what happened? What event was the Mount of Transfiguration about? Yes. Don't tell me Google knows.
A lot going on a leap year. Would it be that Christ took on the role as the Son now?
Was who?
Would that Christ took on the role as the Son or the one that was to be sacrificed?
Well, frankly, you're closer than anybody else so far, but you're not there yet.
His adoption.
What happened again?
He was adopted.
What happened again? Yeah. What is he talking about when he's talking about the adoption?
His father put him in charge of all that.
That's what happened on the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus was put in a position to do what? Well, no, he was putting that. No. What was the adoption all about?
To show people that he really was the Son of God.
Keep going.
All authority has been given.
All right. Because you see, when the Father had these adoption services or meeting, what was the purpose for the adoption services?
That the father no longer would do the work of the son.
If you were Christ and you had just been handed the adoption papers, you were put in a position that nobody else had ever been in.
And nobody else ever will be.
Oh, no, we're in it. We're all in it. But this was where it was first done. What was the purpose of adoption? Do it again.
A father would be in charge of a house, and then once he got older, he put his son in charge of everything, and he would no longer be the head.
Did it have to be the oldest son?
Yeah.
No, but most generally it was. But what was the purpose of the father turning over the keys, turning over the house, turning over the... Who was then subject to the son? Except the Father. Everybody except the Father. That's the reason. In Hebrews 1, it says he was head over all things, but him that of whom he had been, I was speaking of, he was not head of it. I think that's Hebrews. It's either 1 or 2. Turn over there quickly, I'll show you. So the adoption, when though did Jesus receive the adoption?
When he sat on the right hand.
Okay, well, why would he be handed the authority but not use it? It is accepted that all things were put under him. That's 1 Corinthians 15. Better go back to the right place. Yeah, 1 Corinthians 15, I think it's about verse 29. See, we have to understand that these things were given to us to teach and to instruct us, but that's not what I want to get into tonight. I just thought I'd start here because I wanted to see who would remember. Verse 27. Sorry, wrong verse. For he that put all things under his feet, he hath put under things. But when he saith all things put under him, it is manifest that he is accepted, which did put all things under him. Okay, so we got that straight. Now, he comes down from the Mount of Transfiguration, the hill. Why in one place is a mountain and the other place is a hill, in prophetic language?
Governments.
Well, talk to me about that.
Governments. I'm the head. I'm going to quit talking. Depends on how far away you are.
The hill was a law that was inferior to the mountain. It shall come to pass that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mount. That the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established. No, let's go over to Isaiah 2 and 2. I can't, for some reason, get it quoted. Mountain of the Lord's house shall be at the top of the mountains and exalted above the hills. That's it. Let's go over there right quick. It won't take you but a second. All right, read it.
And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountain, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow in it.
So what's a mountain and what's a hill? See, there's two different things here. Which is the greater in height and ascendancy? Mountain. So it's going to be established in the top of the mountains, and it's above the hills. And of course, it's telling us that Jesus was given authority over those under the law of Moses. And this was that what God had commanded. When he got this authority, he was at the height of glory. He was overwhelmed and imbued with a thrill that had to be something that he understood and received. But then he came back down to the earth. And when he came back down to the earth, what did he run into? Look at verse 30. If you're in Mark 9, if you stayed there.
We haven't been in Mark 9.
Oh, we haven't been? I'm sorry. Well, then you won't be there. Well, we've been in Luke. We didn't read Mark 9, did we? 14 through 29. Jesus comes down, and who does he come to? His disciples. Where and how did the people know where Jesus was?
They followed the disciples.
That's a good idea. And where is it that Jesus is assembling and people can find the Lord on the first day of the week?
Wherever all the disciples are going.
Isn't that interesting? Consistent, isn't he?
Yeah.
Where the disciples are. You follow the disciples and you'll find the Lord. Or where the Lord is, he comes to his disciples. What about if you're not a disciple of the Lord?
You was lost.
You might as well meet with the rest of the world. All right, so here we
I was
go.
going to go to the Baptist.
Yeah. He comes down the hill, comes down the mountain, and when he gets down there, he sees a multitude. Verse 14. And the scribes questioning them. What are they doing? They're working the audience. They're playing Democrat or a CNN news commentator. They're trying to find somebody that doesn't like Jesus. And immediately all the people, when they beheld him, were greatly amazed, and running to him saluted him. Now, were they amazed or are they glad to see him? You see, when he went up to this mountain, did they think he was coming?
They were both. As it says, they were greatly amazed and saluted him. So I think they was both amazed and very happy to see him.
All right, but amazed for what reason?
The miracles that they knew he could perform.
Okay, I can handle that. Why else would they be amazed? He had been prophesying that he was going to go away. He was going to go back to the Father. He had gone up to the top of the mountain, or to this mountain, and who was to say that he wasn't leaving from there?
Well,
All the prophets, yeah. Huh?
CNN did.
Yeah, CNN did it. Yeah. But you see, if most of the people had been like, if Jesus had been like most of the people, he got that close to the Father, he'd have just gone on home. But Jesus came back down to now do the dirty work. All right, so they were there. Straightway all the people were there. And he asked the scribes, what are you doing questioning my disciples? If you want to know something, I'm here. Ask me. And one of the multitude answered and said, Master, I have brought unto them my son, which hath a dumb spirit. Where did he get this dumb spirit?
It was a demon.
Very good. How did he get this dumb spirit?
Probably sin.
No.
Inborn sin?
No, he's probably sinned.
The child? How could a child sin?
Well, it says son, but not say how old he is.
Oh, but he does. He tells it.
Well, I've got your point. All right.
We'll find out in a second. But anyway, so here we have this child that has a demon.
Lack of faith is what it is. Lack of belief.
Hanging with the wrong crowd.
So what was this kid doing wrong to cause him to have a demon? Exactly.
He wasn't doing anything, then he didn't
The glory
believe.
of Christ and God that these people were healed. It had nothing to do with the people.
Yeah, well, that's not what you hear from these Pentecostals and all these other people that are in the Church of Christ that don't believe this exists.
If this kid was healed of a dumb spirit, that means he was a once saved, always saved. Right?
There you go. Now let me ask you a question. Who else believed that it was because of sin that you had one of these demons?
The Jews. The Jews, it was their heritage and custom.
His,
Whether
did you say Hazard?
Whether you were cursed.
Hazard, Kentucky?
No.
The disciples believed that.
Well, they were all Jewish.
They were all
except for
Jews,
one or
but that was
two.
their tradition.
It was taught very good. Everybody taught that. Why was the blind man sitting there for all of that time when Jesus came by?
Because he was a sinner.
Isn't that what the disciples asked Jesus? Master, who did sin?
Yeah, what's this guy done wrong?
This man or his parents? See, they even knew that if he was not a man, he wouldn't be held responsible for his action.
You know, you look at Judaism back then, and you look at the Muslims today, you see that similarity there?
Yeah,
do.
I think they're double first cousins.
In a sense that they don't accept gays and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, in that sense, yeah, I can see where you're going there.
All right, so let's keep reading. Straight. Oh.
So it was because the kid didn't believe him? I don't know if I got that right, but it was because the kid didn't do anything, that's why he had a demon?
That's correct. Had this child committed sin, they'd had a reason to think so. Had this child have any age on him, what was the age that the Jew had established now at this point of accountability?
Well,
About 12. No, that's when he became a man.
Be a child until he becomes a
Well,
man.
that's true.
When were they invited to the temple to participate in their worship? 30. When were they there to be taught to begin to understand what they were worshiping? Usually at age 12. Because that's what Jesus was doing when he went and discussed the scriptures with the scribes and the Pharisees and the lawyers and the judges when his mother and his daddy lost him. Well, not his daddy, his mother and his stepfather. All right.
So he was 12 years old, but he wasn't able to commit a sin at that age?
He must have been not able to commit a sin at that age, or they wouldn't have begun the instruction. Could he have committed a sin at the age of 12?
I got a good one. He couldn't commit sin, he was dumb.
He might have had a dumb spirit, but he still could have been in the sin. He might have been able to.
Which sin would he have committed?
I don't know. He might have known the difference between right and wrong. He never said he didn't.
non-belief?
Was it a sin then to know the difference between right and wrong?
It was a sin to know right and wrong. Do wrong.
Show me.
Book, chapter, verse.
Google that.
When Jesus had the rich young ruler come to him, what was it that Jesus inquired of him?
Say again.
When Jesus had the rich young ruler come to him and bow down to worship him as God, what was it that Jesus required of him as to whether or not he could be a servant of God?
Sell his possession. Sell his possession.
What did he ask the rich young ruler?
Have you been obedient to the law of Moses, or the original purpose of
Well, it's actually the opposite. The rich young ruler told him that all these things have I kept from my
you?
youth up. What was it that he was then required under the law of Moses to keep? Jesus said, thou hast known the commandments. The what? The commandments. It wasn't a matter of right and wrong. It was the commandments of whom? Given by law. From Moses. From the Mount of Sinai.
Ten
James
Commandments.
chapter 4, verse 17.
You're in the wrong testament, brother.
James?
Yeah, you're in the wrong testament.
But I was just pointing.
But you're in the wrong
It does say
testament.
in the Bible.
You're in the wrong testament.
You said this was at the time of Christ. Was it?
Yeah, under what testament did Christ live?
Well, the Testament of Moses, the Old Testament.
Okay, well, you're now in James, and that's not under law of Moses.
So, back in the Old Testament, it wasn't something that somebody necessarily did wrong. It was the fact that Satan had a bunch of power and control, and so he was able to build people to do whatever he wanted. Right?
This is the power of God in Jesus Christ. That's what it's all about.
The idea is that what did Adam and Eve, or Adam, do to sin?
Follow Eve's instruction.
Well, that's true. He disobeyed the commandment. But the commandment had to be given him.
Yeah. And God did give it to him. He said, thou shalt not eat from the tree of life.
What commandment did Eve disobey?
You know, if they were 2 and 1, I don't know how she missed it. How does that happen?
She may have been off shopping at Walmart that day. I don't
I
know.
mean, they were still one body, right? Right.
They were still one being.
So how did she miss the instruction that Adam got?
Because she was not the one that was the responsible party that was going to be commanded to do what she was then given to do.
Because only the male part got the,
Yeah, or did she know it and was begotten?
I don't think you could even ask whether she knew or didn't know, heard or didn't hear. We don't know if there was a division at the time.
Question I answered.
Yeah, that's as far as I know.
How that could be.
He was framed.
Well, she knew because she's the one.
She was framed? That's,
She's the one that told the serpent all the.
that's exactly right. But did she understand what she told the serpent?
No, but she wanted what the serpent told her, that she would have control.
Yeah. Because you know what? He convinced her that God had cheated her.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You can have everything but this.
Yeah. And he's cheated you.
Yeah, that-
You mean he ain't going to give you everything? All right, so he said, Master, I have brought thee my son, which hath a dumb spirit. Now this son infers that this was a child, and some commentators think that it was from 4 till 12. I don't know. Guess what? As you want. The point is, was this person a sinner? Okay. And wheresoever he taketh,
But was he a sinner? How? Under the law of Moses, they believed he was. But under the law of God, he wasn't.
they had been. Why were they teaching that a child could commit sin at that age?
He was born in sin.
Oh, he's born in sin. I forgot that part.
Amen.
Yeah, that's what denominationalism teaches.
Because they believe the blessing and the cursing related to your direct relationship to God. And when you've been to Jerusalem and done the service and done all the sacrifices and all that, like the rich man, and done all that was, and that's why he was blessed. That's why he was rich. That was the reason.
I can't disagree with that because I don't know. But the point of it is, why is it that they thought that that child could have sinned? Because they had been taught that in Babylon, not under God. That was never taught in the law of Moses. They had to obey the commands. If they disobeyed the commands, they were sinners. If they were sinners, there was no way that they could ever be back in fellowship with God. But if they had never committed sin, they weren't.
There wasn't very many people in fellowship with God back then, was
It was far more than existed on the earth
And how did they determine whether who was in sin and who wasn't?
because of their age. Turn to Matthew, the 18th chapter.
That and the blessing and the cursing. Can we go back to that?
No.
The guy was rich. If he had a dumb spirit, if he was poor, didn't have a shoes, clothes, then he had sinned some way or another against God. God was punishing him for that. Correct?
That's what they have to. That's what they taught, because that's where the disciples got it. And the disciples were they students of the Old Testament scriptures?
Yeah.
No,
No.
The only one that would be close would have been Judas. And we really don't know what he was. Turn to Matthew 18, verse 6.
Verse 6, got it.
But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it was better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe, excuse me, woe to the world.
Now, wait a minute. Now read verse 3.
And said, Verily I say unto you, except you be converted and become as little children.
Whoa. Become as what? Yeah, they weren't like the little children. What was the difference? They had disobeyed the law of God. What was the law of God that was presently in existence when Jesus was on the earth? The law of Moses. What was the law of Moses? He says, all these I've done from my youth up. Jesus said, time out, whoa, wait.
Sometimes I have a problem with that because they had so abused the law of Moses and literally destroyed it in their traditions that when you say the law of Moses, it almost sounds like Moses was wrong. You know, he messed up. No, they had diluted it and changed it so much that although you say it's the law of Moses, it really wasn't.
Well, that's because the Pharisees and them had taught him wrong.
Sure.
That's just like the
All right, let's keep going. And it says, you're going to be like those who are where? Verse 3. Except you be converted.
And become as little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven.
Oh, so they weren't in the kingdom of heaven. What kingdom were they in? The Jewish kingdom, the kingdom of Israel. There's a big difference in being in the Israeli kingdom and being in the Christian kingdom. All right, now let's go. Verse 7. You got it?
Into the world because of offenses. For it must needs be the offenses come. But woe to that man by whom the offense cometh.
Now read verse 10.
Take heed that ye despise not one of these little ones.
Why?
I say unto you that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven.
Now, in heaven, where was the place called in heaven? And where was God the Father? And was it the same place to which the angels of the children were before the Father? Read that verse again. Hurry, because I'm trying to make a point here and I can't even get started.
Ye despise not one of these little ones.
The little ones. What is a little one?
Children.
That's right. What age do you say childrens are? My father's wife used to call them chillins.
12 and below.
Probably. Most people think it's 4, 5, 6, 7 right in there. Yeah. Let me ask you a question.
They know the difference.
Who would want to teach somebody the age of Kylie something wrong?
Well,
And if they did, wouldn't you? I'm going to answer the question. Who would want to teach them wrong? Every denominational preacher that exists.
Oh, okay.
What was it you told me that some little girl was out trying to do to Cody?
Oh, she's the Seventh-day Adventist, and she's working on it.
Now, is she a Seventh-day Adventist or her parents?
Her parents.
And so what's she doing?
She's talking to him about Jehovah and just trying to indoctrinate him.
And where'd she get this garbage? That's right. What about somebody that is so estranged from love for God that they would try to use a child?
That's what they do.
And who teaches them?
In their Sunday dresses and during the week and getting out of the minivan, they always have a child with them.
Yep.
They used to come up with me and George at the house we work down there. Every day they came by.
So read verse 8 again.
Wherefore, if thy hand or thy foot offend thee, cut them off, and cast them from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life halt or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet, to be cast into everlasting fire.
Verse 9.
And if thine eye offend thee, pluck it out, and cast it from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life with one eye, rather than having two eyes be cast into the hell of fire.
Now read verse 10 again.
Take heed that ye despise not one of these little ones. For I say unto you, that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven.
What are there angels that are in heaven? Were these winged people? Well, what were they?
Spirit beings. Spirit beings.
Spirit beings.
What's he saying?
Spirit beings.
Spirit. What is the spirit being that belongs to the child that's in heaven?
Guardian angel.
Oh, that's a good name for it. And if it's a guardian angel, when do you lose the guard?
You know the difference between right and wrong.
No, because people can know the difference between right and wrong, but that doesn't mean that their guardian angel leaves the presence of God
When you become accountable.
when you become accountable. See, you can know what's right and what's wrong, but until you become accountable for it.
So you can know the difference between right and wrong. Like, I know it's wrong to steal.
But does a 5-year-old child?
If it's taught correctly,
Okay, and if they're taught correctly and they go ahead and steal if they sinned.
then they're accountable for it. Yeah.
No, they're not.
No, the parents are, they go to jail.
They may know and be taught that it's wrong, but if they go ahead and steal anyway, it's not a sin. Because that is not something to which they are amenable. I know that's a big word people don't like to use. That means they don't subscribe to that standard. They're not in a position to where that becomes something that causes them to be disobedient to God yet. But leave them on that path.
And they will.
Yes, sir. It's inevitable. As in a store.
So it's up to the parent if the child does still.
Yeah,
correct.
and what about a child that is not taught by its parent when it's caught to do that, that doesn't take it out and instruct it immediately and try to make an indelible impression on them?
The child thinks it's okay
Huh?
to do it.
They're accountable to God.
That's right. But that child is in a position to be taught wrong.
Perfect example. Your brother goes in and steals Jordan's stickers. He's not sinning. He's being a kid. He's not
Acting
at
out.
that point yet.
He's acting out. It's not
He's
premeditated.
being a brat. He's not being a sinner.
And when Katie tells him to quit being a brat, or
There
he
you
says he's
go.
gonna get 5 on the.
I just flipped back to Matthew 17 since I got you close enough.
Premeditated.
Now,
He's not premeditated.
Jesus comes down from the top of the mountain. He comes down from being put in a position to be the adopted son. Somebody says, well, I thought he was the son of God. Yeah, but there's a difference in the son of God and being the adopted son. You see, you could be a son of the Father and still not be the one in control. So now he's going to, and has been placed in, and is appointed and shown to be the one who's going to have all authority. All right, so he comes down, and he sees these Pharisees and Sadducees. And so he says, verse 15, let's read. Who's got it?
Matthew what now?
17, 15.
Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is a lunatic and sore at back.
What do you think about this man calling his son a lunatic?
He's speaking the truth.
But he's offending him.
Call it a spade.
And the Democrats will throw him out of school.
So if you throw yourself down into the fire, you're a lunatic. That's what he said his son is doing.
Yeah, I know. Keep going. I mean, isn't that sad? He is pitching, as my grandmother used to say, he's pitching a tissy. And somebody's standing around watching him pitching this tissy and not doing anything about it. What's that doing?
Just as guilty as him.
That's correct. But what is that child? It's not being taught and corrected. So let's keep going. Now, this child was not responsible. Was he, Alston?
I guess not.
I'm glad you're guessing, because he was not. If he had have been, would Jesus have been wrong in removing this by complimenting his error? Gonna guess on that one?
I'm not gonna guess on it.
Okay. Well, you're out of guesses. All right.
Can I get a lifeline? For oftentimes he falleth into the fire and oft into the water. And I brought him to thy disciples, and they could not cure him.
Keep going.
Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you?
Who's he talking to there?
Those that couldn't heal
Talking to Satan.
His disciples.
without faith,
Why is it that this got to his disciples?
because they couldn't handle it.
Yeah, and this is a cute little rascal. And who could ever believe that they'd been taught wrong all their life, that this child wasn't a sinner? All right, so Jesus keeps going. Verse 18.
How long shall I suffer you?
Yeah.
Bring him hither to me. Jesus rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him. And the child was cured from the very hour.
Was that child saved from that very hour?
No.
No, he was just cured. The devil was thrown out. What was causing this problem?
Satan.
He was demon possessed. It doesn't mean that you have committed sin. It doesn't mean that maybe you have had to open the door to let him in. It means that the constitution and the mental understanding of the child had been so vexed and destroyed that this demon had caused him to harm himself and created such an uproar. And so the father brought him to Jesus, and he said, I can't do anything for him. Can you help him? So Jesus rebuked the devil, and the devil departed out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. Now the disciples come to Jesus, verse 19.
Then came the disciples to Jesus apart and said, Why could not we cast him out? And Jesus said unto them, Because of your unbelief. For verily I say unto you, if ye have faith as great as mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, Remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. Keep going.
Howbeit,
Howbeit, that this kind goeth not out but by prayer and fast.
did that mean that Jesus had to pray and fast before he could commit this?
Yeah.
No. But a human being who was there in the presence of Jesus should have been able to cast this demon out. But because they had not been doing the job themselves, they didn't have the power to do so. But that's not my point. That's not the study that I want to get to tonight, and what we're trying to find out is why was this child demon possessed?
The devil wanted the father to lose the faith that he had in the Lord.
Maybe the father had already lost him, and as a reason the child was demon possessed.
Okay.
One or the other, probably.
What was the situation that was involved? Now, while we're here, let's go back to Luke 9. And let's see what Paul was saying. Because this gets real interesting. 37, I think. Yeah. Let's start right here. Let's just read 37 through 42.
It came to pass that on the next day, when they were come down from the hill, much people met him. And behold, a man of the company cried out, saying, Master, I beseech thee, look upon my son, for he is mine only child. Lo, a spirit taketh him, and he suddenly crieth out, and it teareth him, and he foameth again, and bruising him, hardly departeth from him. And I besought thy disciples to cast him out, and they could not. Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you, and suffer you? Bring thy son hither. And as he was yet a-coming, the devil threw him down, and tare him. And Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, and healed the child, and delivered him again to his father. And they were amazed at the mighty power of God. But while they wondered every one
All right, what's Jesus teaching them? These things were hidden. We couldn't expect you to do better. Something had been hidden from this child that caused that child, maybe, to have this evil spirit. And what caused the evil spirit allowance to move in? He hadn't been taught.
To the truth and the law.
He was his only son. He was all that he had. He was going to let him have his way in every aspect. And because he was doing that, when the child would disobey and get out of order, what would the parent do? Nothing. Now, people who allow their children to be disobedient and disrespectful to the law of God have something that they need to worry about. Am I destroying, or am I allowing, or am I okaying? Because it becomes a very serious question. So Jesus says, now let me show you the difference. Now verse 46.
Then there arose a reasoning among them, which of them should be the greatest.
Who is this now?
The disciples.
Oh, so right on the heels of this, the disciples were trying to figure out who was the greatest. Why? 3 of them had just come down the hill with the Lord. Would Peter have been able to take care of this situation?
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, no more than the rest of them when the power came to all of them. It came to one of them. What was the situation? They began to try to figure out who was the greatest. Why did they reflect on themselves?
Because they were without faith. And they couldn't overcome the demons.
Yeah, and they didn't have faith in God, which was causing them to have the problem with this. Had you had faith in God, this wouldn't have been allowed. Keep going.
Number 2, compared to God, ain't bad. They couldn't get rid of the demons, so being number 2 that's compared to God ain't bad.
All right, read the next verse. 47.
And Jesus, perceiving the thought of their heart, took a child and set him by him.
What kind of child was this? Somebody said it might have been that child. I have no idea. I just read it. He took a child. Now, here's the difference in the children. One, he could take this child and set it by his disciples or use it as an example. The other one, he was showing him the example of a child that had not been taught and instructed. And because of that, he would imagine having a fit. What do they call them? A tantrum, but they call it something else.
Hissy fit.
An epileptic fit.
Well, was this epilepsy? I don't know. And you know, why not? It could have been, it was a brain problem. Or was it a brain problem? Yeah. And it's an interesting... Yeah, it said it was a lunatic. What is a lunatic? You know what they used to tell you? The lunatic was somebody who slept with the moon shining on his head.
That, sure, werewolf.
And you know, I'm not so sure that they were that far wrong. Why about the moon shining on his head? He was walking under a lesser light. Yes, sir.
Most people sleep when the moon shines.
I'm sorry?
Don't most people sleep when the moon shines? I know I do.
With the moon shining on your head? Yeah, but you know the anxious used to tell you that caused you to be a lunatic.
Yeah, they're lunatics. They're the only ones that don't sleep.
Interesting, isn't it? Keep going.
And said unto them, whosoever shall receive this child in my name receiveth me.
Now, wait a minute. Just receiveth this child.
In my name.
What does that mean?
By my authority.
Yeah, who teaches him what I have taught them. Does so what?
Receiveth me.
Okay.
And whosoever shall receive me receiveth him that sent me. For he that is least among you all, the same shall be great.
All right. So I think what I want you to see by this example is that children are lunatics.
Yeah, they make us lunatics.
No, it's a serious thing. And they couldn't stop the problem. How is it that Jesus stopped the problem? Same way he stopped the storm?
Yeah, by his authority.
Yeah. We had a fellow tell me the other day that his preacher was a miracle worker. And that's when that Irma was coming this way. And I told him, I said, man, why don't you just get him out there in the middle of the Indian River and say, peace, be still. He said, looked at me and he said, why, you think he's a fool? I said, yeah, because he's telling people he can do what God can do. What is it that God could do that would cause this child not to be a lunatic?
Cast the demons out.
Teach him the law of God.
Get the demon out of him and teach him the law.
Well, how did the demon get in? By not teaching him.
Because the parents didn't teach him anything, they let him run wild.
So when somebody asked me the other day, do I think that our children are worse than they were before? Yes, because they're not taught. They have no way to determine what is correct and acceptable. Yeah. What did I mention is the hymn of invitation? 491? 491. 491. If you need to